Charter Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance in Raleigh. We are joined today by Nelson Dollar. He is a member of the North Carolina House of Representatives. He is senior chair of the Appropriations Committee, so very involved in the budget, which passed after some time. It's a long summer. But the good news is the budget has returned to pre-recession levels, so the economy's evening out a bit. Is that your read of the situation?
I think that's right, Brad. It's a $22 billion budget. Of course, a majority of it is in education,
right.
K-12, community colleges, as well as our university system. And then healthcare is the next largest piece. And then you have public safety and, of course, transportation.
Let's talk about education to begin. On the education side, we saw that teachers, as most state workers, I think all state workers, got a nice little bonus, $750, but only new teachers saw a raise.
Well, actually, the way the budget is constructed, we did fulfill our promise that we had made 2 years ago to raise all starting teacher pay up to a minimum of $35,000. And then, of course, more than that, if you are getting a local supplement or local funds on top of that, but that's the minimum at the state level. And that's fulfillment of a promise that we made 2 years ago in 2 stages. In addition to that, we had reformed the teacher pay plan. At one time, there were like 36, 37 steps to the teacher pay plan. We've collapsed those down to 6 now, and the teacher pay plan was fully funded. So that was another $65 million for those who were moving between one step and another step. We addressed a number of specific issues dealing with assistant principals and school psychologists and a host of others. And then on top of that, as you mentioned, we did provide a $750 bonus. So the compensation package in this year's budget just for K-12 education was around $190 million.
What about the folks that complain that, look, we haven't seen a cost of living increase in some time? While we appreciate the one-time bonus, we appreciate that some of our teachers, the younger ones, the ones just starting, will get that bump. But it's time. With the budget returning to pre-recession levels, it's time to give us that cost of living increase.
Well, that's what we've been working on. We have had raises in 3 of the last 4 years, getting back on track from the Great Recession.
Right.
If you look at compensation over the last 2 years for teachers, it has grown dramatically. Now, we believe that there's more to do in terms of teacher compensation. We want to be able to reward the best and brightest teachers in our classrooms. We want to be able to have a system that values our teachers as we should in our society and in our educational system, and we are working toward funding that. We feel we've made good progress the last 2 years, and as we continue to have jobs and to grow our economy, we want to continue to make those future investments in the down the road.
You mentioned that the second, I believe it's the second item in terms of size in the North Carolina budget is healthcare, specifically Medicaid. And this year, after several years of attempts, there was a Medicaid reform package that was passed. It received significant support from the Republican caucus, but there was one member of the caucus that had some concerns about it, and I'm talking to him. And I want to get a sense from you why you had some serious reservations about the reform to the point that you voted no.
Well, the bill had several Republicans with concerns both
that is
in
true.
the House and,
that is true.
And the Senate.
You weren't a lone wolf.
I was certainly not in that regard. The reform bill was a bill that that was my bill that I had a name on. There are a number of good provisions in that bill. What I do believe that we missed the opportunity to do is to allow North Carolina providers, North Carolina hospitals, North Carolina doctors, North Carolina therapists, nurses, to really lead the reform effort. And they will have an opportunity to have a part of the reform effort, but I felt that we did not need to bring in the commercial insurance companies,
Right.
because there's a great cost to that. And my concern is making sure that the funds are spent not on administration, not on some big corporation's bottom line, but that those funds are spent with really smaller businesses, physicians, therapists, directly on care to the patient.
And let me ask you about that, because there are some concerns that have been expressed that given the new system where the PLEs, as they're called, the physician-led groups, and the commercial insurers are competing, it'd be very difficult for the local physician-led groups to compete because they don't have the economies of scale that, for example, these large commercial insurers will have. So,
well, I think another aspect of that too is that for the last 2 years, Medicaid has actually had a surplus in North Carolina, and we anticipate an additional surplus this coming year when the books close in the middle of 2016. So our providers in North Carolina have done a tremendous job over the last 3 years to help us dig out of a number of problems that we had in Medicaid. And because we were getting the problems in our system fixed, myself and some others felt like we should give those providers the first opportunity to really, truly reform the system. Now, I think it's fair to say that with the bill that is passed, that all of us, myself and certainly providers and others, are going to work to make the best of this reform that we can. There are a number of issues. Reform is a multi-year process, probably 6 to 8 years. There are many, many more questions that will need to be answered. And I think in addition, people need to understand that 2/3 of the money come from the federal government. So the federal government will have to be engaged, and they will have to work through these issues in terms of what reform will actually look like at the end of the day. And I think we can actually address some of the concerns that I've raised in my debate over the next several years as we roll out this reform.
you talk about the federal government, and as you know, the federal government, as a result of a Supreme Court ruling, has the ability to give states additional funds to expand the Medicaid pool. It's up to the state to decide whether to accept the expansion. About 30 states have accepted, states with both Democratic and Republican majorities. North Carolina to date has not. And so I want to get a sense from you, how does the reform effort play into the possibility of accepting the Medicaid expansion, if at all?
I think that's an issue that the General Assembly will continue to look at in the future. The concerns that had been raised when it first came up was that we were still working through a number of challenges from the recession. We believe we do have a way forward now with Medicaid reform, but with respect to expansion, the concerns have been, and we're seeing it play out in a number of states, that the cost is actually far more to the states than what has been presented. I know that the administration, the Obama administration has said that expansion, they cover 100% of the cost, and then it goes down to 90% of the cost. A number of states who have expanded have found their cost accelerating far beyond that. So,
and I know some of these states, the challenge they face is the Obama administration will cover those that fall under the new expansion definition, but if those folks would have been able to obtain coverage, but only applied after the Affordable Care Act, the state has to pick up under the old formula. And that's part of the challenge you described.
And that's the reason why you can legitimately say that North Carolina, in some respects, other states would be in the same situation, have already expanded. We have seen over the last 3 or 4 years around, I'd say, close to 200,000 more Medicaid patients than when the bottom out of the recession.
And we'll talk when you come back. He is Nelson Dollar. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is Charter Local Edition.